The church was filled with people believed to be of Taiwanese descent.
Congregants were able to prevent further carnage. The former pastor even reportedly hit the suspect in the head with a chair. Others grabbing his guns and tying him up with electrical cords until law enforcement could get there. The suspect, who's been identified as David Chow, will face 1 charge of murder and 5 felony counts of attempted murder.
Fox's Shannon Bream. JetBlue launches a hostile takeover bid for Spirit Airlines. It's appealing directly to Spirit shareholders to accept an offer of $30 a share after Spirit rejected an earlier $3.6 billion offer in favor of the existing deal with Frontier Airlines. America's listening to Fox News.
Like many other businesses, the pandemic presented challenges and uncertainty. We had to stop operations for months and relied on the PPP to keep our staff employed. We had to develop COVID-related health policies and prepare reopening guidance that modified the way we operated and carried out our program. Our maximum capacity was reduced. We invested in new equipment, stocked up on PPEs, and even had to hire more employees to ensure social distancing and controlled groups. The CARES Act funding and child care stabilization grants from the ARP funds allowed our company to cover business expenses related to the COVID pandemic and stabilize our operations so that we can remain open, continue to provide care to Guam's families, allowing our economy to rebuild and assist frontline workers and those getting back into the workforce.
We're thankful for Congressman St. Nicholas for advocating for these funds in Washington, D.C.
If you have any federal issues, please contact your congressman's office.
Thank you for the federal funds.
Thank you for the federal funds.
Paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
It seems Ukrainian forces may be ceding control of Mariupol to Russia, evacuating from the last stronghold there after months of bombardment. This, as some critics say, Russia is performing badly on a number of other fronts.
The major development and one of the most pressing ongoing stories here in Ukraine. Buses with hundreds of Ukrainian fighters were evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant at Mariupol, taken to Russian-controlled territory. 53 were heavily wounded and over 200 more were evacuated. They'll be exchanged for Russian prisoners of war. Now, it's unclear how many Ukrainian fighters may be left in the tunnels of that steel plant. Those fighters have been in a standoff against the Russians for more than a month now, essentially slowly dying. They are the last resistance in Mariupol. It's a city that Russia has leveled and wants to claim it has full control of.
Fox's Matt Finn in Lviv. As the U.S. tops 1 million COVID deaths and cases rise again, New York City is urging people to wear masks indoors again. Actress Amber Heard takes the stand again after a brief break, facing cross-examination from her ex-husband's Johnny Depp's attorneys.
The trial resumed with Amber Heard taking the stand and testifying about what she claimed were beatings and drunken brawls that resulted in her using makeup to cover the bruises. But Depp's attorneys began their cross-examination by asking Heard if she had abused Depp. She answered that she loved Johnny too much to hurt him. She went on to claim that she filed for divorce from Depp because she worried that she would not survive the physical abuse by him. Johnny Depp previously testified that she was the aggressor and that he was constantly trying to calm her down. Depp also claims that Amber Heard once left a feces in a bed at one of his homes after a fight on her birthday.
Fox's Trace Gallagher, and I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Half a day. Patsy Gogri from Security Title here with information about what a title company does. The title side of our business determines who owns a property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has a management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
Half a day. My name is Jerome Kinata from the village of Umata. I've applied for the program in Salapi to help me in my daily commute from Umata to Manila. Thank you to this administration for the program in Salapi.
The application deadline for program in Salapi has been extended to May 22nd, 2022. For more information, please visit doa.guam.gov. This ad was paid for by the Office of the Governor using government funds.
Kings Guam World Tennis Tour, presented by GTA, is bringing international tennis back to Guam. 4 weeks of international play will swing into action with 2 weeks of juniors, followed by 2 weeks of pros, May the 15th through June 12th. The Guam National Tennis Federation will host world-ranked players who will be coming to Guam from all over the world. Netters will compete for ranking points and cash to improve their position among the world's best. Matches will be played daily at the Guam National Tennis Center in Harmon, starting May 15th through June 12th. Special thanks to our platinum sponsors, Dimension Systems, New Gen, American Medical Center, and Morico Equipment.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's a good way to start a radio talk show. We start the Tall Tales every day that very same way, and we'll continue to start it that way probably for the foreseeable, maybe even the unforeseeable future. So after the respectful reading of the Second Amendment, we go straight to Zemi Akatni, and I search each of our daily newspapers for what they are trying to pass off as an editorial on any given day. The Post gave up about 7 weeks ago. They haven't run any editorials for a long, long time. I guess they're on strike over there at the editorial boardroom, or else maybe they're saying, it's just too hard because no matter how hard we try, we can't meet Bob's high standards, so let's just forget it. Today, the Daily News is running something on its editorial page that would make a pretty good news story. Our View, congratulations, Stephanie Conception, Guam's 2023 Teacher of the Year. And I say I congratulate Stephanie also. Unfortunately, Stephanie, they're not doing you a service here by including you in this editorial with other people. This would have been a news story, except I guess they didn't have anything to put in the news hole where the editorial goes, so they tried to make a news story into an editorial. It didn't work. Okay, next on the card, or let's go to the card. And this is what I've got on the card. Of course, I start with systemic racism. And then I tell you about the treasures that I gleaned from looking at all of the notices on the newspapers concerning Public Law 36-34. After that, I've got Biden versus girls rugby. And then I've got Rugby Boy versus the girls. Estevez versus Brennan, Part 2. Shelton versus the Treasury of Guam. Troy versus Apparon. Teachers versus principals. And Anisha versus wokesters. Not too much to say about systemic racism. I think you all remember the drill. The rice in this picture, if you're watching on Facebook, is supposed to be red. Anybody who's not colorblind looks at it and says, what color is it? Well, it's orange. But if you say that it's orange, you may get canceled because the narrative nowadays is that that is red rice. And when Paul Zerzan wrote a letter to the editor saying, hey, Daily News, that rice isn't red, it's orange, this is what came back. Readers to Zerzan, leave our red rice alone. Our mind is made up. Don't confuse us with the facts. Okay, let's take a look and see what I found under the Public Law 36-34 headline. I combed the notices in the paper to point out who violated the law. Perhaps they're listening. Maybe they can fix it. Civil Service Commission got it just right this time. The Civil Service Commission probably is the standard by which all others should be judged. They seem to get it right every time. And then I have the Guam Community Health Centers. who seemed to have gotten it right. I don't know why I included this. And then I've got the Guam Education Board monthly meeting. The notice is correct, but I found something else in their agenda, and that is that item on the agenda, item Roman numeral 6, 3, alpha, item number 3, safe and healthy schools committee, and underneath that item sub paragraph A, Interscholastic Sports Association. Now, what do you suppose the Interscholastic Sports Association is going to be talking about?
How to stay woke.
How to stay woke. How to make sure that we practice diversity, inclusion, and equity at all times. And then I found another one here that is pretty interesting. This is the agenda for the Solid Waste Commission. And it's got 12 items on the agenda. Item number 10, public forum. A, Ken Leon Guerrero.
I hope they told him.
Yeah, I hope they sent him a special notice. Yeah, that's for their next meeting. And now I have a note here to the governor from Dave Sablon. And this is what Dave Sablon says. It is with great alarm that I've been following news stories reporting that Ken Leon Guerrero, representing himself, is doing presentations to the Solid Waste Management Authority and the Mayor's Council. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. I got that wrong.
Nope.
This is a note from Ken. It's not from Dave. It's from Ken.
You were mixing the two names yesterday, so I understand.
Yeah. And he says, this is what Ken said yesterday. Okay, I got it now. It is with great alarm that I've been following news stories reporting that Dave Sablon, representing Guam Resource Recovery Partners, has been doing presentations to the Guam Solid Waste Management Authority and the Mayor's Council of Guam. Well, I guess Ken's alarm is not that great anymore, since he's going to make a presentation to the Solid Waste Authority himself.
You got to give him credit for the earned media, though.
Yeah, he knows how to get earned media, right?
Well played, Ken.
Yeah,
well played.
Very good. So, once again, I like the sound of waste energy. I like the idea of burning trash and generating electricity with the heat that you generate from burning trash. It appeals to my sense of frugality, resourcefulness, imagination, technological superiority, etc. But I don't have the necessary expertise to rule and say, yeah, that's exactly what we should do here. Because in order to make that decision, you got to get into the financing. It's a pretty complicated subject. So rather than rule on it, I entered an interlocutory ruling saying that I am going to reserve on this until I've heard more from various parts of the community. And then perhaps I would be able to make an intelligent decision and give the official Tall Tales ruling, which will mean either it's a go, it'll happen, or it'll never happen, depending on how I rule on it. That's the power of Tall Tales, of course.
In the government, though, it's the governor who's going to make the decision?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I found interesting is Dave Sablon and Ken Leon Guerrero are going to talk about waste to energy, but Lou Leon Guerrero's retort was wasted energy.
Exactly. She's already isn't quite as judicious as the host of Tall Tales. She knows toxic fumes, and that's all she needs to know. And she thinks maybe we should spend more time on recycling.
She did recycle disinformation.
Yeah, so rather than approach the matter with an open mind, she approaches it with an open mouth, saying her favorite, enunciating her favorite word, no! Yeah. Who? Dave Sablon and Ken Leon Guerrero? Bring them in here. Off with their heads. Yeah, so what's happening now is exactly what I want to see happening. We've got two very well-informed, articulate, knowledgeable gentlemen who are taking opposite sides on this matter. That's great. And I'm glad that Dave is making his presentations to the Solid Waste Committee. I think he'd probably be better off going out and standing in the middle of Marine Corps Drive and hollering at the moon than he would be going to the Mayor's Council, but that's just me. That's just the way I am. Right?
They have a really nice meeting room, though. I think he just wants to see it.
Yeah, they do. And then Ken is going to do the same thing. So in a free society, in an open community, with good citizenship being practiced by all, this is exactly the way we should resolve these kinds of conflicts. So I'm really glad that it's coming down that way. I just couldn't get over the hyperbole that Ken started. A great alarm. That Dave Sablon going to the Guam Resource, going to the Solid Waste Management Authority and the Mayor's Council, with his own pitch. Wow.
How dare you?
Yeah. All right, so it looks like this story may very well have maybe not a happy ending, but a happy middle anyhow. So that's it for systemic racism in 36-34. Next, we've got Biden versus girls rugby. And this is something that appeared in a publication called The Education Reporter over the signature of a gentleman named Kendall Cheats. And this is what he said. President Joe Biden's Department of Education is expected to roll out new Title IX rules. And this, of course, is the reason that Fernandez says, oh, we can't go forward now. They're doing new rules. We have to hold our breath. We can't do anything because they're going to do new rules. President Biden's Department of Education is expected to roll out new Title IX rules that will expand the definition of sex to include gender identity, which experts say will have legal and cultural implications for all aspects of American education. The Office of Civil Rights is planning to take an unprecedented step to expand the definition of sex to include gender identity under Title 19, Title IX of the 1972 Education Amendments, a key civil rights law which ensures no person is discriminated against under federal education program or activity on the basis of sex. The rule change will require every separate sex-separated space, program, building, bathroom, locker room to accommodate individuals who may feel as though they are women, even though biologically they are men. Oh, this is wonderful. Civil rights, human rights. Sarah Perry, a senior legal fellow for the Heritage Foundation, told caller that. All right, what we saw with Leah Thomas at the NCAA championships will now be happening at schools and colleges across the country if they receive so much as $1 of federal funding from the Department of Education, Perry said. A short break here to plug Hillsdale College, if you've never heard of Hillsdale College. Go online, Hillsdale College. They've got a dynamite publication called Imprimis, which they will mail out to you every month. Hillsdale College is located in the southern part of Michigan, the Lower Peninsula, in a very small, plain old Midwestern town. And it's a very good conservative university that does a lot of outreach. But one of their claims to fame is they don't take a nickel from any government at all. not from the city government, not from the state of Michigan, and not from the national government. Therefore, they don't get stuck with silly stuff like this. And that's apparently the only way you can avoid getting stuck with silly stuff like this. What we saw with Leah Thomas at the NCAA championships will now be happening at schools and colleges across the country if they receive so much as $1 of federal funding from the Department of Education, Perry said. And Sarah Perry is a senior legal fellow for the Heritage Foundation. The Office of Civil Rights has already indicated it will enforce Title IX to include discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And what it says is consistent with the 2020 Supreme Court Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia. And this case is also known as Gorsuch's desertion. Gorsuch went over and joined 4 liberals to come up with this ruling that paved the way for this silliness. The Biden administration is using the Bostock ruling as its basis for all other modifications of civil rights law, Perry said, although the decision specifically noted that the Supreme Court did not purport to address bathrooms, locker rooms, or anything else of the kind. Well, if it doesn't address locker rooms and bathrooms, what's the point? Unless you're a championship swimmer, there's no advantage in pretending you're a girl if you can't go into the girls' room. What the heck? The Biden administration is using, the High Court has relied on the concept of immutability, which encompasses characteristics like race, national origin, and sex for decades, Perry explained. But now the Biden administration is attempting to shoehorn an expansive definition of sex into Title IX, which he said was specifically drafted to protect women and girls, giving them all the rights that men already had. So if Title IX gives women all the rights that men already had, then in order for them to avail themselves of their rights, they must become trannies and become transgender men, perhaps go through the whole transition, the surgery, the hormones, et cetera, and then say, actually, I'm a woman. Therefore, they could become transgender women, and they could avail themselves of all the rights that men are now entitled to.
And what's crazy is the seriousness of this is laughable as a satire, but this is real.
Yeah, this isn't Saturday Night Live.
No, this is amazing.
Yeah. What this does is ultimately open up what has been the long-standing successful application of federal civil rights to individuals who happen to feel like a woman or feel like a man at any given time or at any given space. Now, I have a confession here to make, Jose. Sometimes when I go down to Touray on Saturday mornings, and I have to make a head call, and I go back to the head, and the one that says men on it is locked because there's somebody in there, my inner female comes out, and I step into what used to be called the ladies' room. I don't know what you'd call it anymore. But then as soon as I'm finished in there and come back out, I don't feel like a woman anymore. I feel like I did before I went in. Isn't that amazing?
I thought that you change nationalities when you go in the bathroom. Didn't you tell me last week you're European?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you're right, Jose. I hadn't thought of it.
No longer from Wisconsin?
Well, you can be peon and from Wisconsin. You can be a peon and be from Wisconsin too, Jose. In the beginning, everybody was German. I guess that's why, there are a lot of Klitzkies in Wisconsin. Yeah.
So what happens? There's no longer going to be a designated bathroom for the sexes because gender now trumps.
Exactly.
Or gender identity.
Yeah. So you could use the restroom that feels right. Yeah. If you are in a public facility that takes $1 of federal money. So I think if I were in the restaurant business, I would post a sign on the front door that says, "We don't take no money from no federal government." But of course, even that's getting hard now in this post-COVID era. Perry described the rule change as unprecedented and illegal expansion of the law would implicate free speech by forcing individuals and institutions to provide biological men who identify as female with access to women's restrooms, sports teams, and schools. By extending civil rights law, the Biden administration is muzzling individuals who believe sex is immutable and biological. It shuts down these people, utterly silencing dissent in the education context. Max Eden. Oh, that's a good word, Max Eden. Yeah. Once upon a time, well, no, not anymore. Adam, no, they were the same sex. I don't know which sex it was, right? Back in Eden, Max. A research fellow for the American Enterprise Institute said officials in the Biden administration aim to change the culture, not discriminatory treatment. And of course, we know that. That's what cultural Marxists do. They change the culture. They make people so confused about the things they thought that they knew, the things that they could rely on, that they're willing to junk the culture they're in now and embrace the Marxist utopia that would follow this nonsense. Under the new rules, students will now be able to level an accusation of gender discrimination against their school, forcing institutions to become gender affirming. Yeah. So if I were to go back to school as big and ugly as I am, if a teacher referred to me as Mr. Klitzkie, all right, that's it. You're going to get sued. I'm not Mr. Klitzkie. I'm Miss Klitzkie as far as you're concerned, Dumbo. Yeah. Speaker Pelosi held an event to celebrate women's athletes to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the passage of Title IX. Yeah, a lot of good that did you, Nancy. States have enacted legislation that bars biologically male students from competing in women's sports, restricts doctors' abilities to provide transition services to minors, and prohibits certain discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity in elementary classrooms. The conflicting legislation will set up a battle royal in the federal court system to test whether the regulation of a federal agency is more powerful than a democratically passed and enacted state law. Whatever happened to federalism? It's because we have to deal with questions like this that I no longer use the term federal government. We ain't got one anymore. We have a national government, and this is a classic example of what I'm talking about. Our national government gets right down to the schoolhouse level, telling you who gets to go in the little girl's room and who gets to go in the little boy's room. Pay no attention to those 50 administrative districts that some people refer to as states. They have no power. They have no authority. And they certainly can't tell a woman what she could do with her own body.
Can Guam identify as Rhode Island?
I think if the people really wanted to. You know, it kind of brings me back to these light bulb jokes. You know about the light bulb jokes, right? You know how many, I can't use some of them anymore. Well, the one that I can use, do you know how many psychologists it takes to screw in a light bulb, Jose?
How many psychologists does it take, Bob?
It only takes one psychologist to screw in a light bulb, but the light bulb really needs to change, wants to change, needs to want to change. Yeah. I'm sorry, not how many it takes to change a light bulb. I screwed that up, yeah. And then there's certain ethnicity. So how many people of a certain ethnicity does it take to change the light bulb? 4. 1 to hold the bulb, 3 to turn the ladder. You fill in the blank for the ethnicity, Jose. Yeah. If the Biden administration does formally achieve its Title IX goals, it asks the question whether or not they will go beyond issues of bathrooms and sports teams and get to the real crux of the issue coercing public schools to teach and operate that this ideology is true. Of course they will. That's not where they end, that's where they start. That's the justification for all of this stuff. That's the gaslighting aspect of cultural Marxism. Okay, next I go to a story that ran in the Daily News that's incomplete. All right, let's take a short break here.
Half a day. My name is Jerome Kinata from the village of Umata. I've applied for the program as Lucky to help me in my daily commute from Umata to Manila. Thank you to this administration for the program in Salapi.
The application deadline for program in Salapi has been extended to May 22nd, 2022. For more information, please visit doa.guam.gov. This ad was paid for by the Office of the Governor using government funds.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so there's a story on page, I don't have the page number here for the day, back on the sports page. Guam DOE rugby playoffs in full swing. And then there's a story about the boys division and then the girls division. And here's what it says. The girls division will begin its quarterfinals Wednesday at Guam High. The Royals will advance with a forfeit win over the Geckos. Now, why would the Geckos forfeit a game? Doesn't say. The Titans will face the Bulldogs. The Dolphins will face the Cougars. The Panthers will face the Sharks. Now, the Panthers, that's Guam High. The Panthers will face the Sharks. But they're leaving out the most important part of the story. How many boys are going to play for the Panthers? What kind of sports reporting is this? They don't mention the most important thing of all. Rugby boy. Is Rugby boy going to play for the Panthers in this game against the Sharks? All right. Now, I've got another article here that I just got this afternoon. World Swimming Coaches Association announces stance on transgender athletes. I didn't know that swimming coaches were interested in stances.
Just the opening stance. The rest is a stroke.
You think they'd be more interested in strokes than stances, right? On Friday, the World Swimming Coaches Association released an official position on transgender athletes. This comes after biological male swimmer Will, quote, Leah Thomas made headlines for competing on the women's swim team at the University of Pennsylvania after competing on the men's team for 3 consecutive years. Yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, he just wasn't as successful as he wanted to be. At the NCAA Women's Swimming Match Championship in March, Thomas came in first place in a race against female swimmers. The World Swimming Coaches Association position is that the grounds of fairness in swimming cannot be maintained with the inclusion of transgender athletes in women's sports. This was published in a lengthy statement on the organization's website. For the sport of swimming, the inclusion of transgender people on the grounds of fairness cannot coexist in the current competitive model. Swimming should choose to offer competition in which the female category is protected for reasons of competitive fairness. Oh, he'll have all the femme-libbers down on him. Protect you don't need to protect us. Just let the boys swim with us. In many deliberations that are currently taking place within sports, the concept of an open division is touted widely, one where biological males and transgender females would race in one division or category. Oh, that's a great idea. However, there is a view that the use of an open option merely puts the trans problem away. With an open division, trans females swimming against biological males may not even be able to make the required time standards to be able to enter certain events. Can't even make the qualifying times if they're swimming against men. Additionally, trans males competing against biological males do not raise a concern in terms of performance imbalance within the biological sections. In other words, if you got a girl who pretends she's a boy and wants to swim with the boys, she's not going to win many championships. And open competition takes care of the issue we face, but we also have to ask if it takes care of the athletes holistically. The statement went on to explain that events like the Special Olympics and Paralympics have derived over time to recognize biological differences in athletes. The organization argued that this model should be allowed to include transgender athletes in competitive sports, including swimming. There is an argument for needing to follow this path when advocating for trans athletes. To start with the question, what is the biological difference? If we do that, we could create a trans division, a trans meet, or even trans games. But we would start small with a trans division. You want to swim with other people that pretend that they're girls? Fine, here's your division. Trans females cannot compete fairly with biological females. However, providing them with competition that is predominantly that of competing against biological males becomes unfair to the trans females. I think I mentioned the other day, that when it comes to logic, if you start out with a flawed premises, you can string together a very logical argument that comes to a logical conclusion based on the internal logic, but it's still foolish because your basic premise is foolish. And that's where we are here. You're starting out with a foolish basic premise. And of course, this is all logical now. In order to be fair to trans females, it is the exact mirror image for the trans male. He has some biological disadvantage that trans female has an advantage. It forcing him onto the female division would in many cases, and at least, violate our doping rules. We have all these rules about, athletes not doping themselves unless they want to be transgender females. Then they have to take estrogen and testosterone suppressing drugs. One such solution is a trans division. The trans females will race each other. The trans males will race each other. Man, that'll be tremendous box office, won't it, Jose? Who would want to see just a men's swimming meet or a women's swimming meet when you can watch the trans meets? There's an argument that trans males have been completely lost in this debate because they are uncompetitive in our current structure. In other words, women who pretend to be males don't have any advantage at all. They have the same advantage that women would have if they were trying to play against men, and that's because they're women. Our rule as coaches is not to decide if the athlete is ready for transitioning or if they should transition. That's up to them, their parents, and their physicians. Our role is to help them swim faster and develop lifetime health and fitness habits. If we want to protect female sports, grow our sport, and create fair competitions, there's a strong argument that we need to follow the path of history and create a new division for such trans athletes. I suppose that'll be Title 9.1. If you're going to spend money on male and female athletes, you got to spend the same amount of money on trans athletes, although that trans, whatever they are far less than 1% of the total population. In March, former Olympian Caitlyn Jenner came out public, used to be known as Bruce Jenner, decathlon champion in the Olympics, came out publicly supporting Governor Ron DeSantis' position, recognizing the runner-up in Thomas NCAA championship race as the rightful winner. In an interview with Daily Mail, Jenner said transgender women should not compete in women's sports. This is Caitlyn Jenner, you know, the face and voice of transgenderism. I don't think biological boys should compete in women's sports. We have to protect women's sports. That's the bottom line, Jenner told the Daily Mail. I play golf, and 7 years after my transition, I still have a big advantage over women players. I'm 6 feet 1 inch. I have longer arms than the ladies, and I can outdrive them by 100 yards, Jenner added in the interview. Even being off testosterone and on estrogen for 7 years now, what I've got left over is still more than they've ever had. So it wouldn't be fair. I'd feel bad taking a trophy away from one of the ladies at our club who really deserves it, Jenner said. So maybe they changed his sex, but they didn't change his application of common sense. All right. End of that item. Let's see who I got waiting in the green room here. Another Joe, transgender and biologists. Tell me about transgender and biologists, another Joe.
Yeah, Bob, isn't it that didn't the new Supreme Court justice that hasn't been sworn in yet, didn't she give the solution? Didn't she say that she wasn't a biologist, implying that it would take a biologist to have an expert opinion?
Well, she doesn't know what a woman is. She can't define a woman. That's true, yeah.
She said because she's not a biologist, right?
Exactly.
So then that would suggest that she thinks that biologists would know. So
I guess so. Maybe at every swimming meet we should have a biologist, right?
There you go, Bob. So every time they bring up the issue of transgender, what is a man, what is a woman, right? They have to get the okay, the official stamp from a biologist. Then we need to take a look at the biologist to see how many shades, how many different colors they change their shades. You know what I'm saying? Because if they actually go on, if they actually play along with this, they're either confused or they're acting or something. But anyway, Bob, I just wanted to chime in on that.
I'll see your biologist and raise you a psychiatrist.
There you go, Bob. Okay,
psychiatrists are people that deal with nuts.
There you go.
And that's what we're dealing with here. And according to their own rap, a biologist would be useless in determining whether a transgender woman is a woman or a man. Because the only thing the biologist would be able to do would be to examine the physiological structure of the specimen, when what we really need to be able to do is look inside their head, because it's how they feel that governs, not how they look, not their hormonal makeup, not their chromosomal makeup, not their external plumbing. None of that stuff matters, and these would be the things that a biologist would concentrate on.
And this comes down to what you talk about, trying to change not just change the culture to make it irrecognizable.
Yeah.
This is this relativism that we're living in today, where there are no more norms, there's no more reality. It's whatever you want goes. And so they make this great point, this association, about the Paralympics and the Special Olympics, not to segregate for the sake of segregating, but because there's a definitive foundation for doing that. You can't compete against someone who you are severely handicapped against, and I know they don't want to use that word again anymore, but these are the realities we have to face, not relativity. And I wish people would just open up their heads and look at what's going on for real. We keep debating over whether we feel we should agree, we shouldn't hurt people's feelings. You're right. Normalizing this means that you recognize someone as what they feel, but it doesn't mean that you have to be forced into doing every other activity to affirm that, while denying the reality of what's going on. Female sports is now being dominated by men.
Yeah, and taking it to its logical extreme, there won't be any women playing female sports because they won't be able to compete. So it's postmodernism also. Postmodernism, there is nothing that you could really wrap your brain around. It's all very, very relative. And I make the point on Tall Tales every time I get the chance. All of these crazy things that are going on are not independent events. They're all tied together with a strain called cultural Marxism that started in 1922 in Frankfurt, was fleshed out by Antonio Gramsci in Italy in the 1930s, was picked up by Herbert Marcuse and his friends in the 1960s, and really given a lot of strength in the 1960s. The whole structure, or the whole attempts to change the cultural structure of the country, were waiting in the wings for the right precipitating event, which was the death of George Floyd. And then it all came out of the woodwork. The Black Lives Matter folks admit they're Marxist, but we still have people like Tom Shea saying, I back Black Lives Matter. People who ought to know better going over and backing these folks that are part of the whole cultural Marxist revolution that we're undergoing right now, to the point where I fear sometimes that we've reached the tipping point, that so many people have drunk the Kool-Aid that we're not going to be able to tip it back to get it back going the right direction that it should, where a man is a man and a woman is a woman, etc. That's why, every time I get the chance here on Tall Tales, I hate to do this, but I have to issue a warning. This isn't something that's happening somewhere else. This isn't something that's going to happen in 20 years. This is something that's happening right now, right here. And you saw it with transgender. You saw it with rugby boy. And the coaches and the referees being so cowed by the current climate that they haven't done anything. Even the superintendent of education, we don't want to jump in this. We've got to work this out. And he's looking forward to a competitive, inclusive season next year. So when your superintendent of education is on board, we really have a problem, folks.
If he really wants to be inclusive, then just get rid of boys and girls sports and everybody go on the field and play.
Exactly.
'Cause that's what inclusivity is.
It is.
Not these artificial borders and boundaries.
Which, by the way, kind of way it was when I was a kid. We'd play
the playground.
Yeah, on the playground during summertime, we'd always play softball, and if we didn't have enough for two teams, we'd play workup. And once in a while, one of the girls that was better at playing softball would come along and play workup with us. Not a problem. But Those girls never pretended they were boys.
Or forced to playing with boys.
And by the time they got to be teenagers, they didn't even pretend they were softball players. All right, let's take a short break.
Mornings on Star 101 are getting blended. Day, I'm Kyle Mandapat, and I'm making my return to radio on Star 101. I hope you're ready to go, because I'm ready to go. The Morning Blender with me, Kyle Mandapat, every weekday starting May 23rd from 6 to 9 a.m. only on Star 101.
When the pandemic first started and we had no idea that it was going to affect our business till March of 2020. Orders from public health, roadblocks, restriction. It was a very hard time for me. What really has saved my business is the SBA and the PPP program. I felt keeping the employees was so important because I had faith that my government would help me later, the federal government. We applied and we received 2 PPP loans equaling up to $425,000. That money saved me because it's been 2 years. I think 80 or 90% of the restaurants have closed. The only reason I'm here because of my devoted clientele and the federal government.
Thank you for helping save jobs with federal funds.
Thank you to the federal government for all the federal ARP money.
Thank you for the federal funds.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Okay, so here we go. We're getting pretty close to the big halftime show here. Next item on the card is Estevez versus Brennan, Part 2. Adeloop isn't commenting on allegations of discrimination and other complaints against Homeland Security Advisor Samantha Brennan. This is a story I picked up in the Post today. The governor's communications director, Crystal Paco San Augustine, formerly known as Crystal Paco, said the governor's office cannot comment on matters raised in the ongoing dispute before the Civil Service Commission. Brennan terminated Guam Homeland Security / Office of Civil Defense Planner Leo Espia in late April over security concerns involving his use of a server and private emails. But Office of Civil Defense Administrator Charles Estevez said Brennan did not have the authority to terminate. That falls on the Office of Civil Defense Administrator, Estevez argued. The termination appeal is now before the Civil Service Commission, but the matter has brought to light criticisms of Brennan's leadership style. Yeah, so there... This is really an amazing story. I'm going to have some rather derogatory things to say about Mr. Estevez before I'm done here. Reports from other government employees submitted by Estevez in a request to revoke Espia's termination allege that the Homeland Security Advisor undermined or intimidated employees, discriminated against Filipino workers, showed favoritism, and committed other causes of concern. Brennan has not commented on the allegations. She previously worked as the director of the Department of Corrections, where she also received criticism over working conditions at the prison. The Post asked Adeloop whether the governor was aware of the allegations against Brennan in her current role as a Homeland Security Advisor, whether the governor has spoken to Brennan or Estevez about the situation, and what the governor would do about the allegations and concerns levied against Brennan. While there was no comment about these matters, Paco San Augustine did say that Estevez presently on military leave, he is not acting as administrator for OCD. Upon completion of his military training, he may resume his duties as administrator of the Office of Civil Defense. Now, the key word there is may. He may resume his duties, or maybe he won't. So I'm going to go back into the conflict here in a minute, but what you have is you've got one one of Governor Leon Guerrero's directors smearing another director in an appropriate forum. And the governor saying, I'm taking hands off of that. I'm not going to touch it. Well, that tells you a little bit about the Leon Guerrero approach to governing. If you have one director who's smearing another director, it's kind of like, well, I don't want to get involved. You know, after all, I'm only the governor. And it seems that it's a pattern. We have Carl Gutierrez, former Governor Carl Gutierrez, who's the general manager of the GVB, who's in a Pier 9 brawl with his board of directors over at the Visitors Bureau. And the governor's approach to that is, I'd really like to tell you about that, but you'll have to excuse me. I've got to go into the ladies' room and wash my hands of the whole matter. So let me go back to yesterday's story on Estevez versus Brennan. Officer of Civil Defense Administrator Charles Estevez is challenging the termination of a planner at the Homeland Security, Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense. Now, a good reporter would tell you the nature of the Guam Homeland Security Office and the Office of Civil Defense, because it's confusing. So I cheated. I went to the law. And if you look at 5 GCA Chapter 1, Section 14104.2, you find this. Advisor for Homeland Security. The advisor for Homeland Security is appointed by the governor and shall serve at her pleasure. The Homeland Security advisor shall be subject to the availability of funds which may be locally appropriated, etc. All duties and responsibilities of the Office of Guam Homeland Security as established by executive order are established by law, etc. The advisor shall coordinate the executive branch efforts to detect, prepare, etc., protect against acts of terrorism, etc. So the advisor is a strange title, but if Mr. Espia works for the advisor for Homeland Security, then she can fire him. If he doesn't work for her, then she can't. And we take a look at civil defense. This is Title 10 GCA at Section 65103 Alpha. There is hereby created within the office of the governor an office of civil defense with an administrator of civil defense, hereinafter called the administrator, who shall be a member of the classified service and is the administrative head of the Office of Civil Defense, subject to the direction and control of the governor. The administrator, with the approval of the governor, may employ such technical, clerical, stenographic, and other personnel and make such expenditures within the appropriation, therefore, etc., as may be necessary. I'll come back to the Office of Civil Defense in a minute.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A presidential condolence call. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. President Biden and the First Lady traveled to Buffalo, New York today to meet with the families of the victims from what police call a racist rampage.
The fact that the president is coming here shows how seriously he takes the issue of availability of guns, mass shootings, hate speech, and the things that we are dealing with out of this tragedy.
Mayor Byron Brown. Investigators say the suspected mass shooter, Peyton Gendron, was motivated by racial hatred when he allegedly shot and killed 10 African Americans and wounded 2 other people. Gendron's due in court on Thursday. New York City police say an 11-year-old girl was caught in the crossfire yesterday in the Bronx and lost her life. 2 men opened fire. They were on a moped. As they drove by, the bullet missed the target, a group of men on the corner, instead hitting the girl. An explosion yesterday in Baltimore, Maryland, injured 4 police officers, 2 medics, and a civilian. Police say they believe that a former employee set a fire that caused the explosion after officers arrived at the scene. The injuries for the officers and the medic are not life-threatening. Those for the suspect are. And the Senate voted late yesterday to advance the $40 billion aid package for Ukraine, with 11 Republicans voting against it. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell vowing to finish that aid package this week and hold a vote this summer on expanding NATO to add Sweden and Finland. President Putin with this response.
There is not an immediate threat to Russia with the inclusion of those countries, but the expansion of military infrastructure over that territory will obviously call for our response.
America's listening to Fox News.
Stay on top of the latest.
Hafide. I'm the owner of Guam's largest tourist attraction group. The pandemic has been very tough for all of us, and particularly for my team members. So I'm really appreciative and grateful for the PUA assistance to our team members, and more recently, the SVOG federal grant that allowed us to reopen these facilities and re-employ everyone at a critical time when PUA ended. From myself and my team, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the federal funds that allowed us to reopen.
The federal fund you provide saved many, many jobs. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We employ about 35 technicians for our shows. Thank you for the federal funds that kept us going.
Thank you for helping with the federal funds.
Thank you for the federal funds.
Thank you for helping to save our jobs.
Thank you for the federal funds.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
It's primary day in several states, including Pennsylvania, where the U.S. Senate race is tight, despite the endorsement from former President Trump for one of the candidates.
Some Pennsylvania conservatives who questioned Trump's backing of Dr. Mehmet Oz went with Dave McCormick, who told Fox's America's Newsroom the day before the primary
that I'm uniquely aligned on conservative values, able to win the general election, and able to show up on day one as someone who's been battle-tested, a combat veteran, a job creator in Pennsylvania, and someone that knows what to do to get our country back on track.
And while he and Oz have spent millions attacking each other in TV ads, Kathy Barnett surged to become a contender as well. Over the weekend, the likely Democratic Senate nominee, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, was hospitalized after having a stroke. He said he's recovering and still planning to win. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Workers at a Trader Joe's grocery store in western Massachusetts following the lead of some Amazon and Starbucks workers and are seeking to unionize. Organizers at the store in Hadley sent an open letter to the company's CEO citing concerns about pay, benefits, and safety. Under fire from parents and politicians, the Biden administration announces steps to ease the nationwide shortage of baby formula, including working on a restart of the production at a formula plant in Michigan.
Formula maker Abbott has reached a deal with the Food and Drug Administration to restart production at a large factory shut down after formula recalls in February. Federal health officials have been investigating safety problems at the Sturgis, Michigan plant. Even with production resuming, Abbott says it could take several weeks to begin shipping new product to stores. The FDA is also easing some restrictions on baby formula imports. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
And Dow futures climbing at this hour, up 124 points. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Hafide Guam, this is Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. Our teams at Public Health and GITA are rolling out several new programs to make childcare more affordable for working families while supporting childcare providers and growing jobs. Programa ni Pinila ni Famaguan Guahan launched on April 5th, and we've expanded eligibility so thousands more families now qualify. Please visit visit GuamChildCare.com to learn more about these programs and apply for relief today.
This ad is paid for with federal funds administered by the Department of Public Health and Social Services.
The Federal Reserve is starting to increase interest rates to fight inflation, but they're still so low, making it the perfect time to refinance your home, to lower your rate, and perhaps take advantage of its increased value to put some cash in your pocket during these uncertain times. Cash that you can have the freedom to access when you want, where you want, with your Bank Pacific Visa debit card. Lower your rate with cash in your pocket. Access your cash when you want, where you want, with your Visa debit card. Brothers put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, credit conditions apply.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Yeah, so here we are, second half here at Tall Tales after another great halftime show on the program. And I'm going to go back to Estevez versus Brennan and draw some conclusions here. I don't really think that Charles Estevez covered himself with glory in this matter. Office of Civil Defense Administrator Charles Estevez is challenging the termination of a planner at Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense, arguing that the firing was done unlawful and that actions against the employee appeared retaliatory. The planner, Leo Espia, also was the director of Emergency Operations Center and was terminated in late April as a result of charges stemming from cybersecurity concerns involving his reported use of personal devices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Homeland Security Advisor Samantha Brennan issued the final adverse action and termination on April 26. Well, if Homeland Security, if Espia worked for Samantha Brennan, since if he worked for the Department of Homeland Security, then she had the authority to do that. Several days later, on May 9, Estevez submitted a memorandum to the Human Resources Division at the Department of Administration requesting that the adverse action be revoked. The Homeland Security Advisor does not have disciplinary authority, making Brennan's termination of Espia unlawful, Estevez wrote. Well, I just went through the statutes here. So the question was, does Espia work for the Department of Homeland Security or the Office of Civil Defense? Now, this news article doesn't give you much help in straightening this out. They're just reporting. They're reporting everything that I suppose was easy to get a hold of without digging to find out what's really going on. But there's a picture that ran with this article that may be a tell. And there's a picture of Espia holding up a piece of paper, and the caption says, Leo Espia, then acting director for the Office of Civil Defense, shows village mayors where tsunami alert sirens were placed on a map during a special meeting in June 2012. So if Espia could be the acting director of the Office of Civil Defense. Maybe he was an employee of the Office of Civil Defense in 2012. Maybe not, because sometimes directors, acting directors, come from other agencies. And, of course, June 2012 was 10 years ago. But that's the key right here. Who does Espia work for? So if Espia is his supervisor, then as a matter of law, Esteves has a point. And the question then is, well, how does he raise the point? And I suppose the way you raise that point is a letter to the governor, not to the letter to the personnel division at the Department of Administration.
Are these two agencies working together? Is that, I'm kind of confused on the organizational chart here.
Yeah.
They should already have one.
There should be one somewhere, and apparently they do work together. Yeah. And they're always lumped together, Homeland Security and Civil Defense. And I have never seen a definitive explanation of who does what to whom. Now, I just read the two statutory provisions. They're both operating, they're both cited in the governor's office, physically and statutorily, I suppose. Yeah, so Esteves said the head of the Office of Civil Defense holds disciplinary authority. After reviewing the documents and timeline of the case, Esteves stated that Brennan's actions toward Espia appeared retaliatory, which is a road he does not need to travel. If she doesn't have the authority to do it, it doesn't make any difference why she did it.
That seems kind of a retaliatory statement in itself.
In itself, yeah. I'll show Brennan. Yeah, right. Let me see here. Okay, Esteves, let's see. By several days later, on May 9, Esteves submitted a memorandum to the Human Resource Division of the Department of Administration requesting that the adverse action be revoked. Well, of course, the Human Resource Division can't do that. They can't revoke it. In fact, there isn't even a person named Human Resources Division. It might have been something if he had written to the Director of Administration, but even that would have been wrong, because the only person, the only official in the government that can set aside a final notice of adverse action is the governor, especially when both these agencies are located in the governor's office. So, and you'll concur with me, I think, as we read into this, the major effort here has not so much to do with Espia as Esteves finding an opportunity to smear Brennan. Okay, so Brennan reportedly disabled Espia's badge and access to the GHS OCD facility, instructed staff not to talk to Espia, and directed a law enforcement officer to check up on him at a clinic where he was being treated to obtain information. Okay, so disabling his badge and telling the folks at the agency he doesn't work here anymore, don't give him any information, right? That's legitimate. But this next sentence, I just love this next sentence. Brennan instructed staff not to talk to Espia and directed a law enforcement officer to check up on him at a clinic where he was being treated to obtain information, causing me to think, well, they wanted to get something out of Espia. They sent him to the clinic. They're going to administer truth serum, maybe waterboard him. I wonder what information he holds. Now, Jose, yesterday you told me what they meant, even though they didn't. What do you think they meant?
Say it by the phone.
Okay. Yeah, Jose said yesterday he thinks that what that sentence meant was that Brennan wanted to get information from Espia, not that the staff at the hospital wanted to get information from. Okay, and then Estevez said was not just a waste of time, a waste of resources, but a potential violation of federal health privacy law. Well, once again, if Estevez is the director and has the authority, it doesn't matter. Going on, there are multiple complaints related to Samantha's toxic leadership, style, and personality, the hostile work environment she created, and her actions against Leo. Now, if he is in charge of civil defense and she's in charge of Homeland Security and they're supposed to work together, and I were the governor, I would take Mr. Estevez to the woodshed. You don't publicly slam another director in this administration. I don't care what the cause. If you have reason to do that, you come and talk to me, but you don't tell a reporter. You don't try to smear one of your fellow directors in the press, Mr. Estevez, and that's exactly what he did. Estevez's memorandum included incident reports expressing concern that Brennan had undermined employees, contradicted herself, discriminated against Filipino employees, and showed favoritism, among other allegations.
But she still has no authority.
I just thought I'd throw that in there to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit. Yeah. You know, we all know that if you really overstate your case and exaggerate and engage in slight hyperbole, people maybe pay more attention to what you write.
This is what's called reverse misdirection.
Reverse misdirection.
You actually muted what your real problem was, your real issue was.
Yeah, exactly. Estevez goes on to say 3 Filipinos at the agency were discriminated against, according to the memo. As an example, Brennan questioned leave requests for being sick or experienced car trouble, but approved leave for a non-Filipino who wanted to get a haircut, according to documents filed with the Civil Service Commission. This guy is not fit for a government position. You know, what he's saying is, hey, you guys up at the Civil Service Commission, this isn't anything that's going to come before you, but I got some really salacious stuff I want to tell you about Samantha Brennan. The Post called Brennan for comment Sunday about the allegations in the civil service case. Well, it's not a civil service case. She declined comment. Well, she's really, because of the way Estevez handled this, she's really in a deep hole. Before being named Homeland Security Advisor, Brennan had served as the Director of Corrections. Her tenure had been a rocky one, having seen criticism over working conditions at the prison. Brennan resigned from the directorship in November 2019 and later took on the role of Homeland Security Advisor. Now, the term advisor is misleading, as I mentioned when I read the statute, because the advisor is in charge of Homeland Security. Estevez stated in his May 19 memo to DOA that as the disciplinary authority, he will conduct an inquiry on the claims against Espia after returning from military leave. So he's not even the Director of Homeland Security right now. I mean, of Civil Defense, because he's on military leave. So somebody else is the acting director of Civil Defense. It's not him. Yeah. But Estevez also said he was troubled by actions taken against Espia. Estevez said Espia had worked 20 years at Civil Defense and otherwise has a respectable reputation in the emergency management community and a clean record. And besides that, he dresses well. He's kind to animals. He never jaywalks. He helps little old ladies across the street. He registers his car on time. He wouldn't even think about tearing tags off mattresses. and Brennan fired him. Wow. The matter has made its way to the Civil Service Commission, where Espia filed a termination. Well, if Brennan is not the director, it's going to be a real easy appeal for Espia to win. A status call was held May 11. Assistant Attorney General Donna Lawrence represented Guam Homeland Security and OCD. Now, you can't represent both of them. That is becoming apparent now. She can represent one or the other, but she can't represent both. CSC Administrative Law Judge Eric Miller, also known as the Wolf Whisperer, if you read the Pacific Island Times, said he received an email indicating management was withdrawing the final adverse action against Espia, seemingly referring to a letter Esteva sent that morning, containing the DOA request to revoke the termination. Lawrence said management was not withdrawing the adverse action and asked who submitted the email, as it would cause her great concern. Well, you know, if I were the lawyer and I found out that someone from the administration said, we're dropping the appeals, I would have great concern. If anybody is going to inform the Civil Service Commission that the adverse action is canceled, it's got to be the lawyer. It can't be the messenger from the Department of Administration. It can't be somebody who's on military leave. It can't be somebody who lives in the same neighborhood as the Civil Service Commission. Yeah. Miller confirmed the email came from Estevez, who also attended the virtual status call. Now, why would he attend the virtual status call if he's on military leave? And I see a lot of misconduct here, but I'm not looking at Espia. Lawrence said she was representing management and Estevez was not a party in the case. She repeatedly objected to Miller questioning Estevez during the call, resulting in a warning from the administrative law judge. Yeah, this is the wolf whisperer, you know, the guy that whispers in the chairman's ear, and then they take a 5-minute break and a private 5-minute break. So, you know, from reading this story, if I were counsel, I would ask that the matter be adjourned until I could make a motion to the Civil Service Commission to tell their administrative law judge to be the administrative law judge, not Dick Tracy or Sherlock Holmes examining every email that comes before the commission on a status call. A status call is the administrative law judge and counsel for the two parties. They don't go to the merits. They decide the schedule for hearings, and that's it. Unless the administrative law judge happens to be Eric Miller, who apparently has a more expansive definition of his role in these things. Mr. Miller, this is a violation of due process. What are you doing? Lawrence said. Estevez said he was Espia's supervisor in the agency. Okay, well, that doesn't do it. You got to be more than the supervisor. You have to be the director of that agency. Being a supervisor means nothing in this context. Another status call is scheduled for May 18. Okay, then the adverse action stated that Espia committed an unauthorized breach, et cetera, also accused of making false statements, insubordination, etc., and so on. So we don't need to get into the merits at all. There are a couple of things going on here. First thing is the question, the role of Homeland Security vis-a-vis the Office of Civil Defense. Is it one agency? Is it two agencies? Who is in charge? If it's two agencies, is Brennan in charge of one and Estevez in charge of the other? Which one of the two agencies does Espia work for? If it's Homeland Security, and Brennan fired him, then the next step is for Espea to defend himself before the Civil Service Commission. If anybody wants to call Esteves as a witness, if anybody's that cuckoo, then they could subpoena Esteves and he could come and testify as a witness. On the other hand, if Espea works for Esteves, then he has the ability to dismiss him. And if someone other than him attempted to dismiss, it is a bad fire. And the way to straighten that out, as I mentioned earlier, is for Esteves to have the governor issue an order saying this is canceled. Or actually, I suppose Esteves himself, if he has that authority, could come up with a paper that said in notice of final adverse action that came out over the signature of Samantha Brennan is void because Brennan doesn't have the authority to discipline my employee, who is therefore reinstated with back pay. But then the third thing is, where does Esteves get off smearing Brennan?
It went from a personnel matter to a personal matter.
Exactly. A very personal matter.
This is also the worst rewriting of Who's on First.
It really is.
I just can't follow anymore.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. The only thing that's necessary now is to substitute pronouns so that we could refer to everybody as they. We could be even more confused. Yeah, but it is classic Who's on First. But I don't like to see government employees fighting with each other in public. I don't care if Esteves is right and Samantha Brennan is the worst person who ever worked for the government and everything that he says is true. I don't care.
Especially these agencies. Guam Homeland Security.
Right.
Civil Defense.
Yeah.
Wow, get it together, guys.
Yeah, well, civil defense and Homeland Security, it's all about fighting. But we're supposed to be thinking about fighting an enemy, not fighting each other. Yeah, what a mess. And Governor, you are in charge here. It's your mess to straighten out, or you're going to get blamed for this every day that it goes on.
Aren't we still in a declared health emergency
Yeah,
with
she
one
said,
sole authority?
Yeah, she said she's going to do one more. Okay, next item on the card is Shelton versus the Treasury, but I got to go to Wrigley Field for the seventh inning stretch, and coming out of there, another Joe came to bat again.
Half a day. My name is Jerome Kinata from the village of Umata. I've applied for the program as Lapi to help me in my daily commute from Umata to Manila. Thank you to this administration for the program in Salapi.
The application deadline for program in Salapi has been extended to May 22nd, 2022. For more information, please visit doa.guam.gov. This ad was paid for by the Office of the Governor using government funds.
Mornings on Star 101 are getting blended. Half a day, I'm Kyle Mandapat, and I'm making my return to radio on Star 101. I hope you're ready to go, because I'm ready to go. The Morning Blender with me, Kyle Mandapat, every weekday starting May 23rd from 6 to 9 a.m. only on Star 101.
Okay, here we are at Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark. I'm stumbling around out in the center field bleachers, and who do I find out there? I find a guy named Joe. In fact, I find two guys named Joe. So I'm not going to put Joe on the line, but I will put another Joe on the line. Good afternoon again, another Joe. Happy Ferris wheel.
So this issue of the battling directors, it seems as though that Mr. Estevez has come into your crosshairs more than once. I don't know how many times in the past several years. Could it be that he might be using some of your wisdom? I wonder if should he be calling tall tales and asking you before he makes statements or takes action?
Well, there are two Esteveses, and I suspect they're probably brothers. There was a senator named Fernando Esteves who distinguished himself as a senator when he went to the main gate of Anderson to protest over that tree that everybody's so concerned about, and locked arms with other people to prevent traffic from coming into and leaving Anderson Air Force Base. This was our senator, all in the name of military preparedness. So that's Fernando Esteves, as in by the firelight, Fernando. Anyhow, it's a famous song. This guy's name is Charles Esteves. Now, they could very well be brothers, but it's not the same guy.
And the other thing, Bob, is it seems as though every time you mention this particular story, I don't know if they've ever said this before, but they sent the poor guy to get treatment. And it's confusing as to what that means. I think someone's going to have to call them up and say, what exactly do they mean by this, sending someone for treatment, for information or something? And when every time you bring it up, you seem to be very enthused or thrilled by it. And I wonder, is this the military training in you that, when you start thinking about like waterboarding?
Well, it's more like the English teacher in me. I taught English here 50 plus years ago, and I'm pretty hard on people that write for newspapers. I expect a high standard of writing in newspapers, and when it's not there, I mention this almost every day. I got my blue pencil here, and I'll correct it. So let me find that sentence again. Brennan reportedly disabled Espia's badge and access to the Civil Defense Facility, instructed staff not to talk to Espia, and directed a law enforcement officer to check up on him at a clinic where he was being treated to obtain information.
Oh, gosh.
So poor old Espia, he's at the hospital, and they're treating him over there, and they're trying to get information from him.
I hope he wasn't getting a colonoscopy.
And what we think the sentence means is they sent the cop over there to get information from Espia, not that they sent Espia to the hospital so the hospital could obtain information. But and it's so much easier now than it used to be. Back in the day, when you had to rap it all out on a Smith Corona typewriter, and if you made one mistake, you had to get in there with your, what was that called?
The whiteout.
The whiteout, and correction fluid. And, I took high school typing because, once again, I took 2 years of Latin in high school. I mentioned this before because the conventional wisdom was if you study Latin, you ought to study Latin if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer. I couldn't get into medical school because my handwriting wasn't bad enough. And when you get to law school, the first thing you have to learn is how to mispronounce all the Latin terms. Because if you went into court and asked a judge for a writ of habeas corpus, he'd laugh you right out of court. But conventional wisdom at that time said, well, Bob, if you're going to go to college, you really ought to take typing because then you can type your notes and everything. So I took typing, and I got up to about 30 words a minute and about 30 errors a page. I was just horrible. I just don't have the manual dexterity to be good at it, Ironically, though, I'll have to tell you this. I didn't go near a keyboard. It had to be over 50 years. But when we finally got into word processing and everything like that, I sat down at a word processor, and my fingers still remembered the keys. I could touch type now as good as I could in high school, which ain't saying much. But it's so much easier now with word processing to produce quality writing, because it's so easy to, you get it on paper, you go back, you proofread. It's so easy to edit and polish and make it come out exactly right. Anybody who read this and let it go, boy, they took
terrible.
They took to check up him in at a clinic where he was being treated to obtain information.
So Esteves can add HIPAA violation to his charges.
Exactly. Yeah.
I challenge all of your regular callers, like Bob, to interpret what that sentence is supposed to mean. From the most dangerous man to repeat and Frenchie. I like to hear what they all think about that.
Yeah. Repeat. I thought his name was Dick. No, I'm thinking about something else again. Okay, good talk.
Okay, goodbye. Thanks for your time.
Good talking to you, another Joe. Okay, next item on the card here is Shelton versus the Treasury. And this is a story that ran in the Daily News. We can afford this measure would raise COLA by 25%. COLA. The government of Guam should be able to afford a $200 increase to the $2,000 annual cost of living allowance, or COLA, given to GovGuam retirees by next fiscal year, according to the government's financial leaders. Lawmakers held a public hearing Tuesday for Bill 257, which would increase and gradually raise the cost of living allowance by $100 each fiscal year until it reaches $2,500 in fiscal 2026. A $2,200 payment would go out in November to all retirees and their survivors. The final increase would result in an overall 25% increase to COLA benefits that haven't been changed for years. The last increase to COLA was in fiscal 2015, and that was from $1,800 to $2,000 per retiree, said Bill 257's author, Senator Amanda Shelton. For the past 7 years, the cost of living on Guam has certainly increased for everyone. When she says everyone, do you think she means even people that don't work for the government of Guam? I don't think so.
Nope.
I don't think she means those people. We see it in the cost of housing, utilities, health insurance, food, gas, and the cost of living allowance for our retirees has not increased. And this has put a strain on the fixed incomes of many of our manamko. Based on the 7,248 retirees paid COLA benefits in fiscal 2022, Bill 257 would increase the annual cost to the government of Guam by an estimated $1.45 million in fiscal 2023 and $3.6 million by the time the full COLA raise goes into effect in fiscal 2026, according to a fiscal note provided by BBMR. The COLA cost for fiscal 2022 was $14.5 million. Bill 257 would set aside roughly $15.9 million from the general fund for fiscal 2023 COLA payments, about $16 million paid to retirees. I believe that we can fund this amount in 2023, Department of Administration Director Ed Byrne told lawmakers. He added that it would put a brief pause on the reduction of GovGuam pension deficit, which was being reduced. Now, I got to stop there and see if I can remember how all this stuff works. There is, I can't remember the term, but the government's contribution includes about a 25% figure to retire the retirement fund's unfunded liability. And this is all complicated, but unfunded liability means this. If everyone who's eligible for retirement would retire tomorrow, we owe, several million dollars. It's a big hole. And it's because we've been too generous with our retirement fund over the years. So I'll have that term tomorrow. So every year, when the legislature approves its budget, it also modifies that figure. So in order to come up with the $15.9 million, they're going to have to pay less into that fund. And that's why Burns says he added it would put a brief pause on the reduction of GovGuam's pension deficit, because the money would be going to the retirees instead of to retire the deficit, which, if you're a retiree, has to be extremely important to you, because the last thing you want, folks in my category probably don't have to worry about it too much. We're probably going to run the clock out before there's any danger of the retirement fund going belly up. But if you're, say, in your 40s and you haven't been retired that long, it's a cause of real concern. Now, explanation of some of the other terms. COLA. What COLA is an acronym that means Cost of Living Allowance. We've never really had a cost of living allowance. When the retirement fund was first enacted, when a pretty good retirement was probably $6,000 or $7,000 a year, there was an automatic increase for every year that you were retired of $200. So if you've been retired for 20 years, your annuity has gone up $200 a year, or what is that, $4,000? Yeah, that was kind of the approach at the time. But there is no cost of living allowance built into the retirement fund. A cost of living allowance would mean an increase in the actual annuity based on a calculation of cost of living. And the federal government keeps a couple of indices dealing with that. That would be a real cost of living allowance. We have never done that. What we do instead is appropriate money as an ex gratia payment to retirees. In other words, a gift to the retirees. And this COLA payment now, it was different before 1995, but now it doesn't depend on how long you've been retired, how much your annuity is, how old you are, et cetera. It's just $2,000 a year. So it's not a cost of living allowance by any stretch of the imagination. It's a gift from the taxpayers to every retiree. And that's what we're talking about here. We want to increase the size of the gift, even though it's going to impair slightly our ability to make a dent in the unfunded liability. Back to the article. Bureau of BBMR Director Lester Carlson agreed. And then, of course, we can't deal with the facts here. We can't deal with the numbers, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about older people and supplementing their income to be able to keep up with rising costs. So I feel, not I find, not I think, I feel the measure is thoroughly warranted and doable. Well, I'm really glad that the guy who's in charge of our budgets feels that it's warranted. GovGuam Retirement Fund Director Paula Bloss said about an extra 200 or so people are expected to be receiving COLA by the end of the fiscal year, increasing the cost of the potential November COLA disbursement to about $16.5 million. Given the current increases in teacher pay and uniform personnel, we may see a reduction in some of them deferring retirement, Bloss said. Most would probably wait another year to see an increase in their retirement benefits, she said, and a better estimate would be available in July. Bloss said the majority of government retirees are earning less than $40,000 annually. Tello wanted to know whether any consideration had been given to adjusting COLA annually based on the cost of living instead of the irregular and flat increases that retirees usually see. That's two good ideas in a row from Tello. When we first had COLA, there was really no classifications as to why COLA was given. They just came up with it. Let's do 1,500 at one time, she said. And then one year they went down to, I think it was 1,100 or 13, and then went back up. Speaker Therese Tetlahi said federal programs like Social Security had a cost of living adjustment tied to annual changes in price index. That's how a real COLA works. Guam law empowers the Department of Administration director, also known as the Director of Administration, to review whether adopting the federal system of adjustments in whole and in part were feasible. Tetlahi said, and increases in the Guam CPI and changes to Social Security were similar over the past 5 years. Burns said he was unfamiliar with any study that had been done but would review his agency records. So, you know, if we want to talk emotion here, which is, you know, that's what our director of BB, he says he feels that it's warranted. And Shelton figures, well, we'll give the retirees some more money. And to look at it in the cold, hard light of reality, the more money that we pay to the retirees as COLA, the less money there is for non-government retirees for all other government services. So we've come through this long period where our government pretty much laid waste to our economy, and people, you know, not a single government employee or retiree missed a check during that entire time. Not so for folks in the private sector. A lot of people really took it hard in the private sector. You know, we're going to pick up free cans of food and things like that. How well will this sit with those people who suffered through that long pandemic and now see Senator Shelton going out with a headline that says, raise COLA by 25%. Whereas a lot of them, if they got a 25% raise, it would be 25% of nothing. Okay, let me see who I've got in the green room here. Our Keith. It's good to be a GovGuam employee. You better Hong Kong believe it, our Keith.
Hi, Bob. You know, these are really, past 2 years have been quite fat times for government employees, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, first they get paid 6 months not or longer for not to do any work at all. Then they get some type of bonus or stipend that was supposed to be intended for the private sector who wasn't working. But we must make things fair. So the people who haven't been working but have still been getting paid, they get a little something. And teachers get a 20% bonus, and then the administrators get something on top of that. And now this. So how's the private sector doing nowadays?
Yeah, the pits.
You know, this really is so reminiscent of every, I don't mean to be inflammatory here, but socialist/fascist operation, where the government and party membership, which has its benefits, get, you know, live like hogs, you know, in top of the heap. Meanwhile, everyone else has to grovel. It's clear she's, you know, bolstering up her base, who are GovGuam employees. You ought to see the number of her bumper stickers, of cars with her bumper stickers on them over at the GCIC building. It's just outrageous. I just don't understand why more people aren't outraged at this.
Yeah, you make a good point, as usual, Keith. It's, you know, people talk about second-class citizens and second-class this, that, and the other thing, but obviously we have two classes of resident here on the island, the lucky ones that work for GovGuam and everybody else. And I've used the comparison of driving buses. You know, GovGuam bus drivers, you know, make up around 30 grand, a lot of benefits, fringe benefits, etc. I think driving a tourism bus down on the beach is going to get you about $12 an hour. If you have a job. And right now, of course, nobody has a job. And if you're driving one of those buses, you got a good chance of working on Christmas and Thanksgiving. And, of course, if you work for the government of Guam, more often than not, you get the day after Thanksgiving off with pay. So
that's about all the other, not only federal holidays, but all the state holidays, religious holidays, and then whatever random, sometimes the governor will give, let's just give them the day before Thanksgiving too.
So I'm waiting for the populism to arrive here because, we see some people coming out, want to run for the legislature. I haven't seen anybody attempting to do anything that hasn't been done before 20 times, say anything different, take a different approach. But I think that a credible messenger who comes out with a message, I'm for the people, I'm not for GovGuam employees, I'm going to make sure that government of Guam employee is de-glamorized, and I'm going to try to set the stage so that people who are not working for the government can have as good a life as those that do. And I think that would be a dynamite political ticket. But I don't think anybody wants to do it.
I just am outraged at how placid the population is. I guess it's because there's still all this federal largesse stemming around. But at some point, that's going to dry up, and maybe then people will wise up.
Well, again, I lay it at the feet of people who want to run for the legislature. And I say this all the time. Everybody who runs for the legislature runs down a copy of the 1972 playbook and follows it to a T. Got to go, R. Keith. Good talking to you as usual.
One last comment.
Yeah.
Orwell summarized it wonderfully. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
The ironic thing about George Orwell's 1984, when I read it, I didn't realize that it was a how-to-do-it book.
Exactly, the instruction manual.
Yeah, see you later, R. Keith. All right, let's head for Churchill Downs.
My name is John Kinata from the village of Umata. I've applied for the program as Lucky to help me in my daily commute from Umata to Manila. Thank you to this administration for the program as Lucky.
The application deadline for Program in Salapi has been extended to May 22nd, 2022. For more information, please visit doa.guam.gov. This ad was paid for by the Office of the Governor using government funds.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Okay, here we are, Churchill Downs in Louisville. A couple more furlongs and I'll be crossing the finish line and heading out of here, but I'll be back tomorrow. Next item on the card is Troy versus Apparon. And this, of course, ran in Candid News. The headline is Apparon sold PT property to priest ahead of lawsuits.
Wait, what?
Ex-Archbishop Anthony Apparon entered into a peculiar series of land transactions right before sex abuse claimants sued him. According to public records at Land Management, the disgraced leader of the Archdiocese of Agana sold land near the PT Church to a priest who has since left Guam And 2 years ago, in the midst of bankruptcy proceedings, that priest sold the property for nearly twice what he paid. On December 12, 2014, in the midst of a brewing church scandal, Charles and Jeanette Simmons executed a deed of gift, giving property adjacent to the road entering Our Lady of Peace Church in Petey to the church. Now, when you give something to the church, when you give it to the Catholic Church, Law and Order notebooks, Jose, there is a creature in Guam law called the corporation soul. And the corporation soul is the titular head of any religious organization on Guam. For the Catholic Church, the corporation soul is the Archbishop of the Diocese of Agana. And he holds title to all of the real property, all the assets, etc. It's a corporation soul. It's like other corporations. It has perpetual existence. So when a bishop dies or is replaced, his replacement then becomes the corporation soul. So if these folks, these nice people, the Simmons, executed a deed of gift giving the property to the church, what they really did was give it to Anthony Apparon, Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Agana, a corporation soul. That's how it would have led on the deed, meaning he holds it for the church. 4 months later, on April 30, 2015, Father Willie Lorilla, pastor of the church, executed a deed of gift granting the property to Apparon in his capacity as the Archbishop. So I guess the Simmonses must have deeded it to the pastor of the church. But then it comes to Apparon. 12 days later, on June 12, 2015, Apparon sold the property for $35,000 to Father Rian Enriquez. At the time, Enriquez, a naval lieutenant commander, was the chaplain for U.S. Naval Base Guam. So Apparon sells church property to a chaplain, a U.S. Navy chaplain, and gets $35,000 for it. A warranty deed recorded at Land Management was signed by Apparon that day, though the payment was not issued to the Archdiocese until 4 days later. On June 16, attorney Edward Talahi wrote to Deacon Dominic Kim at the Chancery office and enclosed Enriquez's check for $35,000. The sale occurred just months before Apparon and the Archdiocese were first sued in the sex abuse case that eventually would see nearly 300 plaintiffs against the Guam Church. In January 2019, the Archdiocese filed for bankruptcy. Sometime since, Enriquez acquired the property in 2015, and in 2020, the priest left Guam. On June 22, 2020, Enriquez appointed Cynthia DeSone Pissarro as his agent through a power of attorney. And the same day the power of attorney was recorded, Enriquez also filed a warranty deed showing he sold the property to Edwin and Aline Guiao. According to the recording fee, the land was sold for $55,000. This is not the first instance of Apparon and the church officials selling church property in the midst of the controversy. This is, however, the first series of transactions Candid has uncovered involving Apparon and another member of the clergy. Apparon is the gift that keeps on giving. All right, that's it for today. It's that time again. Let's go, Brandon. See you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
He's expected to call it terrorism. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. President Biden will visit Buffalo, New York today and carry a message against racial hatred. Officials say the president will call the supermarket mass shooting terrorism motivated by a hateful and perverse ideology that tears at the soul of our nation.
Both President Joe Biden and his wife, First Lady Jill Biden, are scheduled to fly to Buffalo, New York today. The city's residents are still reeling from this weekend's mass shooting attack, of which authorities say was racially motivated. The White House says both the president and the First Lady will grieve with the Buffalo community. New York State prosecutors are still holding the gunman, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, on first-degree murder charges, and federal investigators are considering a hate crimes indictment. Eben Brown, Fox News.
The gunman killed 10 African Americans and wounded 2 other people. Investigators in Southern California say the man killed trying to stop a gunman at a church may have saved dozens of lives. Dr. John Cheng was shot after tackling David Chu on Sunday at a Taiwanese church in Orange County. Now, Chu was then subdued by parishioners. 5 other people were wounded. Deputies say Chu was motivated by hatred against Taiwan. Ukraine's government says its combat mission in Mariupol is over and evacuations of its soldiers are underway.
Buses with hundreds of Ukrainian fighters were evacuated from the Azovstal steel plant at Mariupol, taken to Russian-controlled territory. 53 were heavily wounded and over 200 more were evacuated. They'll be exchanged for Russian prisoners of war. Now, it's unclear how many Ukrainian fighters may be left in the tunnels of that steel plant.
Fox's Matt Fenn in Lviv. And markets were mixed yesterday. The Dow gained 26 points. The Nasdaq